Don't come. I'd be embarrassed to introduce you, she said before her high school reunion. I said, of course. That night, I moved out. She came home at 2 a.m. to an empty apartment and a note that said, when Natalie told me not to come to her high school reunion, she did not raise her voice or hesitate. She said it the same way she said we were out of oat milk or that the rent had gone up again. Casual, clean, almost considerate. She framed it as practicality, as if she were sparing me an inconvenience instead of cutting me out of her life for an evening. She said it would be awkward. She said her classmates were shallow. She said she did not want to have to explain me. I nodded. I even smiled. I told her it was fine. That moment did not feel explosive. It felt quiet, which was worse. Something settled into place in my head with an uncomfortable sense of clarity. I realized that this was not a comment made in stress or haste. This was something she had rehearsed internally, something she believed enough to say out loud without fear of consequences. Natalie had been different for weeks. She had started waking up earlier, spending more time in front of the mirror, buying clothes that did not match anything else she owned. She talked about people from her past with a strange mix of resentment and excitement. She scrolled through social media late at night, tilting her phone away from me without realizing she was doing it. None of this was dramatic enough to confront. It all sat just below the surface, like static you only notice when the room goes silent. We had been together for 3 years. We lived in a clean but unremarkable apartment with neutral walls and furniture we bought because it fit, not because we loved it. We shared groceries, bills, routines. I handled most of the logistics without thinking about it. I paid the utilities, scheduled maintenance, renewed subscriptions, managed the lease communications. Natalie had a good job and paid her share, but I was the one who kept things running. I did not mind. It felt like contribution. That afternoon, after she said she would be embarrassed to introduce me, I sat at the kitchen table long after she left the room. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I replayed her words, not angrily, but analytically. I realized she did not say she was worried I would be uncomfortable. She said she would be embarrassed. The emphasis mattered. I went into the bedroom and looked at the closet. My side was half full, arranged neatly, predictable. Her side overflowed with new outfits still tagged. Impulse purchases justified by the reunion. I took a breath and did something I had never done before. I stopped imagining a conversation and started imagining logistics. I checked my calendar. I checked my bank accounts. I checked the lease agreement stored in my email. Everything I needed to know was already there. The lease was in both our names, but the renewal window was open. Utilities were in mine. Streaming services, cloud storage, the internet account, the renter's insurance. None of it required an argument. None of it required permission. Natalie texted me around 6 that evening, a quick update with a photo attached. She was already dressed, already out, smiling too hard under bad lighting. I did not respond. Not out of spite. I simply did not feel the urge. Something about the decision had already been made, even if I had not fully acknowledged it yet. I started packing slowly. Not dramatically. I folded clothes. I sorted documents. I put my laptop, chargers, and notebooks into a backpack. I packed only what was mine, leaving shared items untouched. I did not want confusion later. I wanted the absence to be unmistakable. As I moved through the apartment, I noticed how much of myself was embedded in small systems Natalie never thought about. The router password taped behind the modem. The spare keys labeled in my handwriting. The emergency contact list on the fridge. I took nothing symbolic. I left no mess. I cleaned as I went. Around 9, I called my brother and asked if I could stay with him for a while. I did not explain much. I did not need to. He said yes without asking questions. That mattered. By 10, I had finished everything that required physical movement. What remained were decisions that required intention. I logged into each account and removed my payment information. I transferred subscriptions. I scheduled service cancellations with effective dates that made sense. I notified the landlord that I would not be renewing and that my intent to vacate was immediate. I did not accuse. I did not complain. I documented. I wrote the note last. It took longer than packing. I did not want it to sound emotional or cold. I wanted it to be precise. I explained that I had heard what she said and accepted it. I explained that I did not want to be somewhere I was considered an embarrassment. I explained that I had moved out and that future communication should be limited to practical matters. I did not threaten. I did not insult. I did not ask questions. I ended it without a signature flourish. I left the note on the kitchen counter, face up, waited with my keys. I walked out a little after midnight. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. The elevator ride down was quiet. I remember noticing how calm my hands were. That surprised me more than anything. At my brother's place, I slept deeply. No dreams. No racing thoughts. Just rest. Natalie came home at 2 a.m. I know this not because I was there, but because she told me later, repeatedly, in messages I did not answer right away. She said the apartment felt wrong as soon as she opened the door. She said the silence was loud. She said she thought someone had broken in until she saw that nothing was missing except me. Her first call came at 2:07. I let it ring. The second came at 2:12. Then messages. Short at first, then longer, then erratic. She alternated between confusion and irritation, as if she believed this was a misunderstanding I would clear up if she used the right tone. By morning, the messages shifted. She said she did not mean it the way it sounded. She said she was stressed. She said reunions were weird. She said I was overreacting. She said we needed to talk in person. I read everything without responding. What Natalie did not understand yet was that this was not a reaction. It was a conclusion. Her comment had simply removed the last excuse I was using to ignore a pattern. She did not push me away in a fight. She dismissed me in a sentence. That was cleaner. Later that day, she went back to the apartment and reread the note. She told me she had read it 3 times, looking for a hidden meaning that was not there. She said it felt like paperwork. She said it scared her more than if I had yelled. By evening, she realized I had taken my name off the internet account. The streaming services logged her out. The shared cloud folder was gone. The quiet systems she never noticed stopped working one by one. Not out of malice. Out of order. That night, while Natalie sat alone scrolling through photos from the reunion, trying to rewrite the narrative in her head, I sat on my brother's couch eating takeout and watching a game I barely paid attention to. My phone was face down on the table. I did not feel triumphant. I felt resolved. The thing Natalie would not understand until much later was that embarrassment had nothing to do with her classmates. It had everything to do with how she saw herself reflected in me. And once she admitted that out loud, even briefly, there was no version of staying that made sense anymore. That was the night everything started moving. She just did not know it yet. The day after I left, I did not wake up to relief. I woke up to momentum. Once something heavy is removed, the body keeps moving for a while, unsure whether it is falling or finally upright. I showered at my brother's place and put on the same clothes I had worn the night before, not because I lacked options, but because continuity mattered. I wanted the decision to feel real, not theatrical. Natalie kept calling. I did not block her. I wanted a record, not silence. By mid-morning, her messages had shifted tone again. Confusion had turned into bargaining. She wrote long explanations that did not ask questions. That detail stood out. She was not asking what I needed or what I wanted. She was building a defense, not a bridge. I went to work and focused on things that responded to effort. Emails, tasks, systems that behaved logically. It was grounding. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I did not expect. It was a former classmate of Natalie's named Evan Morales, someone I had met once at a barbecue and barely remembered. He asked if everything was okay between Natalie and me. The phrasing was careful. Too careful. I did not reply immediately. Instead, I asked myself how he had my number. Then I remembered Natalie had once insisted on adding me to a group contact list when she was organizing a holiday event. She liked the appearance of inclusion. I replied simply that we had separated. Nothing more. Evan responded quickly, saying he was sorry to hear that. Then, after a pause long enough to suggest hesitation, he said he had assumed we were not together anymore based on what Natalie said at the reunion. That sentence landed with weight. I asked what she had said. He hesitated again, then explained that Natalie had described herself as single in everything but paperwork. She had said we were living together out of convenience. She had joked about how long things had been stagnant. She had presented herself as someone in transition, not someone betraying a partner. The reunion had not been nostalgia. It had been marketing. I thanked Evan for telling me and ended the conversation. I did not feel angry. I felt aligned. The pieces fit too cleanly to cause confusion. Her embarrassment had not been about awkward introductions. It had been about preventing contradictions. That afternoon, Natalie showed up at my brother's building. She did not call first. She stood outside until I came down, pretending this was spontaneous rather than desperate. When I stepped outside, she looked relieved, as if proximity alone might undo what had already happened. She launched into explanations immediately. She talked about stress, about image, about how people from her past were shallow and judgmental. She framed the reunion as a harmless performance, something everyone did. She insisted she had not meant to hurt me. She insisted intention mattered more than impact. I listened without interrupting. I noticed how she avoided specifics. She spoke in generalities and emotions, not facts. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, I told her calmly that I knew she had presented herself as unattached at the reunion. Her expression changed, not to guilt, to calculation. She adjusted her posture and said it had been easier that way. She said people did not understand nuance. She said it did not change how she felt about me. She said words at a party were not real. I told her that words spoken publicly were more real than ones whispered privately. I told her I was not interested in being hidden for her convenience. She tried a different angle then. She said I was overreacting. She said leaving without discussion was immature. She said adults talk things through. I reminded her that she had talked. I had listened. The conclusion had been efficient. She asked if there was someone else. That question revealed more than she intended. It showed she believed decisions like this required replacements. I told her no. I told her the absence of a competitor did not invalidate a boundary. She grew frustrated. She said I was being cold. She said this was punishment. She said I was trying to humiliate her. That word again. I told her quietly that humiliation came from exposure, not absence. Then I went back inside. That evening, the reunion stories began circulating more widely. Photos appeared online. Natalie tagged herself enthusiastically, reshaping the narrative in real time. She looked carefree, unattached, triumphant. But comments began appearing that did not align with the story she wanted to tell. Questions. Congratulatory messages that assumed she had been single for a while. A few people asked what happened to me. She spent the night responding selectively, deleting what she could, spinning what she could not. The next day, she called again, calmer now, as if she had decided on a strategy. She asked if we could meet somewhere neutral. I agreed, not because I intended to reconcile, but because clarity prevents escalation. We met at a cafe near her office. She arrived early, which was new. She spoke slowly, carefully. She said she understood now that what she said had been hurtful. She said she had been insecure about her standing among her classmates. She said she had wanted to appear successful, admired, desired. She did not apologize for lying. She apologized for timing. I asked her directly about Brandon Hale. Her eyes flickered. Just once. She admitted they had reconnected at the reunion. She said it was harmless. She said he was nostalgic, not serious. She said nothing had happened. I did not argue. I told her that her need to present herself as available had consequences regardless of physical details. I told her I was no longer interested in negotiating my dignity. She asked what I wanted then. Closure. Friendship. Space. I told her I wanted consistency between how I was treated privately and how I was represented publicly. Since that was no longer possible, I wanted distance. She left angry but composed, already preparing a version of the story that preserved her image. What she did not realize was that others had noticed the inconsistency before I ever said a word. People remembered who she had been, who she claimed to be, and how abruptly the narrative shifted. She had underestimated the memory of casual observers. That weekend, Brandon stopped responding to her messages. Not abruptly. Gradually. He delayed replies. He canceled plans. He created distance. He had not signed up for instability. He had signed up for admiration. Natalie felt that shift immediately. She called me late that night, her voice tight, asking if I had told anyone anything. I told her I had not needed to. By the end of the week, she realized that leaving me had not elevated her. It had exposed her. The reunion she had treated as a reset had become a reference point people kept returning to, comparing versions of her story and finding gaps. I watched all of this from a distance. I focused on practical matters. I updated my address. I redirected mail. I established routines that did not include her. Natalie had thought embarrassment was something you avoided by controlling appearances. She was learning that embarrassment is what happens when control fails. And she still believed the worst was behind her. It was not. By the time Natalie realized this was no longer a misunderstanding, her options had already narrowed. That was not something I planned as a tactic. It was simply what happens when someone confuses presence with dependence and never learns the difference. The first sign came when the landlord emailed her directly. She forwarded the message to me within minutes, asking what it meant. The message was neutral, procedural, and brief. It confirmed receipt of my notice to vacate and explained the timeline for inspection and deposit handling. It also noted that renewal would require requalification under a single income if she intended to stay. Natalie had assumed the apartment was stable ground. She had never asked how it stayed that way. She came to my brother's place again, unannounced, early on a Saturday. This time she did not wait downstairs. She rang the buzzer repeatedly, as if volume could substitute for consent. When I went down, she looked tired in a way she could not style away. Her confidence had thinned. She said the landlord was being unreasonable. She said the lease had always been fine. She said it was unfair that everything was happening at once. I told her nothing was happening at once. Things were simply happening without me buffering them anymore. She followed me back upstairs, talking faster now. She said utilities had been disconnected temporarily because payments had bounced. She said customer service had been unhelpful. She said it felt like everything was breaking. I told her systems do not break. They revert. That comment landed harder than I expected. She stared at me, trying to decide whether it was an insult or an explanation. She asked why I had not warned her. I told her I had. She had just dismissed the warning as something that embarrassed her. She accused me of planning this, of setting traps. She said no one leaves like this unless they are trying to hurt someone. She said this was revenge disguised as maturity. I told her that revenge requires pursuit. I had done the opposite. She asked me to help, not directly, but through implication. She talked about shared history, about how much I knew about managing things. She framed it as temporary assistance, not dependence. I said no. That was the first time she heard that word from me without qualifiers. She left angry again, but this time there was fear underneath it. Fear is louder than anger, but it leaks in different ways. Over the next week, Natalie's life compressed. She downsized in real time. She canceled plans. She borrowed money from a friend she had once mocked for being boring. She moved furniture to make the apartment look smaller, easier to manage, as if space itself were the problem. At work, she missed deadlines. She had always been good at presentation, but now presentation could not cover gaps in follow-through. She blamed stress. She blamed personal upheaval. People listened politely, then adjusted expectations downward. She tried to regain footing socially. She reached out to reunion contacts, including Brandon. He replied once, vaguely, then stopped altogether. When she pressed, he said he was busy. When she pressed again, he did not respond. She showed up at my place again that evening, unannounced for the third time. This time she brought paperwork, bills, notices, a printed email chain from the landlord. She spread them on the table like evidence. She said she did not understand how things had unraveled so quickly. She said she had never realized how much I handled. She said she thought we were a team. I told her teams require mutual respect. She had treated me like a liability to be managed. She asked if I would reconsider, not the relationship exactly, but the arrangement. She said we could reset expectations. She said she would be more careful about how she spoke about me. That phrasing told me everything I needed to know. I told her I did not want to be managed better. I wanted to be valued consistently. Since that was not possible, there was nothing left to negotiate. She accused me of abandoning her when she was vulnerable. She said real partners did not walk away at the first sign of trouble. I reminded her that trouble had not made her embarrassed. I had. She left without slamming the door this time. Quiet exits are harder when you are the one being left. The following Monday, I received a message from someone else connected to the reunion. It was a woman named Karen Whitlow, someone Natalie had once described as competitive and superficial. Karen apologized for reaching out and said she felt uncomfortable after learning that Natalie and I had not been separated before the reunion. She said Natalie had implied I was emotionally unavailable and financially unstable. She said this had surprised her because she remembered me differently from past encounters. I thanked her for the honesty. I did not correct the narrative. I did not need to. The contradiction existed on its own. Natalie's version of events required everyone to cooperate. Mine required no participation. As the week went on, she began to feel the cumulative effect of small withdrawals. The building's superintendent stopped prioritizing her requests. The internet provider required a deposit she had not anticipated. The renter's insurance lapsed. Each issue was manageable alone. Together, they overwhelmed her. She called me late one night, crying but controlled, asking how I had learned to think this way. She said it felt like I had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. I told her I had not been ahead. I had simply been paying attention. She asked if I still cared about her. That was not a manipulative question. It was an honest one, and it deserved an honest answer. I told her I cared enough not to lie. Caring, I explained, does not obligate someone to stay where they are diminished. It obligates them to leave cleanly. That answer ended the conversation. By the end of the month, Natalie was no longer asking for help. She was asking for relief. She talked about being overwhelmed, about needing a break, about how unfair it all felt. She had started telling people that I had blindsided her, that I had disappeared without warning, that I had punished her for a single comment taken out of context. Some people believed her. Many did not. The ones who did not had noticed something important. I had not argued publicly. I had not posted. I had not corrected. My silence was not strategic. It was consistent. Natalie had believed the worst outcome of her comment would be a fight. She had not anticipated a restructuring. She was still waiting for me to come back angry. I was already gone calm, and she still did not understand that the hardest part was yet to come. The moment Natalie stopped asking me for help was the moment reality stopped negotiating with her. When people move from requests to endurance, they are no longer trying to change outcomes. They are trying to survive them. I did not celebrate that shift. I noticed it. By early spring, the apartment no longer made sense for her. The landlord approved a short extension with penalties, not kindness. Natalie paid them because panic shortens horizons. She packed her things alone, selling what she could and giving away what she could not carry. The place that had once looked like proof of progress now looked like a waiting room. I learned this not through updates from her, but through practical loose ends. A forwarded utility notice. A misdirected package. The echo of a life I had already stepped out of. She found a smaller place across town. Not worse, just honest. Fewer amenities. No concierge. No image. She told a mutual acquaintance it was temporary, that she was regrouping. The word regrouping did a lot of work for her those days. At work, her performance review landed. She told people it was unfair, that personal stress had clouded management's judgment. The truth was simpler. She had relied on energy and charm in a role that now required steadiness. When steadiness disappeared, results followed. She kept trying to explain herself into a better position. She talked about growth, about lessons learned, about becoming more grounded. Some people nodded. Others remembered how easily she had dismissed someone who had made her life function. Brandon did not return. That door closed quietly, without confrontation. The man she had imagined as an upgrade had seen enough instability to step back. He did not want to be anyone's proof of worth. He wanted admiration without friction. Natalie tried once more to reach me in a way that felt different. She sent a short message asking if we could talk, not to fix anything, but to understand how it had ended so cleanly. There was no urgency in it. Just curiosity. I agreed to meet. We chose a public place neither of us had an emotional claim to. She arrived on time. She looked composed, not defensive. She had clearly rehearsed restraint. She said she finally understood why the note had unsettled her. She said it had felt like being assessed, not rejected. She said it made her realize how often she had confused being admired with being respected. She asked if I had planned to leave before the reunion. I told her no. I told her I had planned to stay until she told me who I was to her. She said she had not expected consequences to arrive so quickly. She said she thought embarrassment was a feeling you avoided, not a verdict you earned. I told her embarrassment is what happens when values are revealed under pressure. She asked if I regretted how things ended. I told her regret assumes a better alternative existed. It had not. She nodded, slowly. She did not argue. That was new. When we stood to leave, she said something that stayed with me. She said the hardest part was realizing that nothing I had done was loud enough for her to resent. There was no villain she could blame without contradiction. That was the last conversation we had. In the months that followed, Natalie rebuilt something smaller and more accurate. She learned to handle her own logistics. She learned which friends were performative and which were present. She learned that admiration fades faster than competence. I learned that leaving without spectacle creates a different kind of silence. One that does not invite rebuttal. People asked occasionally what had happened between us. I told the same version every time. We wanted different things. The truth did not need embellishment. Natalie's reputation did not collapse. It corrected. That is more painful. Corrections linger. As for me, life did not transform overnight. It stabilized. I took on fewer roles and felt less tired. I built routines that did not depend on being unseen. I noticed how much energy clarity returns. Sometimes I thought about the reunion. Not with bitterness, but with distance. It had not been the cause. It had been the confirmation. Natalie had believed embarrassment was something inflicted by others. She learned it is something revealed by choice. I did not leave to punish her. I left to preserve myself. And what stayed gone was not love, but the version of myself willing to be diminished quietly.